Yeah, thank you, Barbara John. But now Michael has a very difficult task. Michael Zisser, our president of the IFS, and as I was told, future past president of the IFS, but because you are all promised to get a coffee break at 11 o'clock. And Michael asked for 15 minutes of your patience, and now he has to do 15 minutes in 10 seconds, which is really a problem. But I think Michael will do it.
Hello, goodbye. It won't be 10 seconds, but I have shortened this a bit. And I was told I have to speak slowly. Melissa, slowly. Now I'm back up to 20 minutes. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. This is a great conference. It's been planned beautifully, and I hope you enjoy all the rest of the conference as we go through the next few days. In a few days, Melissa, tell me if I'm... In a few days, I will finish my role as president of the International Federation of Settlements and Neighborhood Centers, having served for the past 6 years. My involvement on the board or as a member extends over 20 years, and I hope to continue that engagement in the future. Consistent with my reputation, both with IFS and in my position at University Settlement, for saying what I believe needs to be said, I will use this opportunity to discuss 3 controversial issues confronting us now, and which will be even more important in the future for the work of IFS. I will present each as a conflict between opposing views of the world, of our place in the world, since we seem to be living in a time when polarization is rampant and unavoidable. Standing here thousands of miles from home, I hope this speech will help me perhaps mitigate the effects of a mental health disorder I am now experiencing, known in the United States as the Trump disease. Every day I live in fear of what will be my country's future if the wrong person is elected president. The 3 issues I will briefly address are truth versus lies in the public arena. Second, a commitment to sharing what we know among friends versus our tendencies to be isolated. And third, the future of IFS as an advocacy network instead of having an overemphasis on operating programs. First, truth versus lies in the public arena. If the presidential campaign in the United States is proving anything, it's that there is no longer any such thing as evident or accepted truth. Outright lies are becoming commonplace in our public discourse, accepted as truth or just accepted as free speech. Lies are not challenged, either by the public or the press or by other parties. Reinforcement of lies by repeatedly telling more lies has become a successful marketing strategy, based on the premise that sooner or later, the truth will be completely obscured. There are no consequences to lying, as if it makes no difference. I'm not talking about issues which may be subject to interpretation or about an acknowledgement of varying perspectives or interpretations on complex issues, but about lies easily documented and fact-checked. How does this happen? How has this become acceptable in the political arena and in our communities? We know that people only hear what they want to hear, only read what they want to read, only socialize or talk with people like themselves. So lies aren't lies and sound perfectly fine to them, consistently in line with their beliefs and feelings and knowledge. People, including the press, won't challenge false statements even when they know better. And I am not referring here to countries with limited freedom of speech or lacking a free press. Lies, outlandish lies, apparently make for better tweets or headlines or news bites. The indifference to truth exhibited is frightening. To be clear, my reference here may be about the United States, but from what I read and hear, as I will mention later, the same diagnosis can be made for almost every country represented in this room. From a management perspective, as I teach my social work students, I do say that every leader lies at certain moments, mostly little lies to make organizational life easier. I had some examples here, but I'm going to cut them out. You can ask me personally and we'll check this. Sometimes effective strategies require us to shade the truth a bit. Family members also sometimes lie, especially to those they love, because the truth can be hurtful and unproductive. But political lies are dangerous because there is no way of knowing where the lies end and reality steps in, or when the basic concept of trust is so seriously undermined that it is unrepairable, or when the consequences can be very damaging and perhaps irreparable on a larger scale. And my response to this issue, don't lie too much. And certainly no big lies. Don't support those who lie. Call out publicly and loudly those who are lying, even when they are possibly your allies or your funders. In America, we use the phrase, speaking truth to power. The only way to return to some level of trust and truthfulness in public discourse is to be unrelenting in its defense. We also represent a very large number of people in our communities. Directly and perhaps sometimes indirectly, we must convey to them in appropriate ways what they need to know to be effective members of our communities. This position will require us to open our minds a bit, to understand the arguments and opinions, even of those with whom we disagree. We are not free from politics. We are, if we remain true to our historic traditions, political at our very core. Sharing versus isolation. I'm from New York City. Obviously, we believe that no one knows anything more or better than we do. So why would we think there was anything to learn by coming out of our parochial shell? Wait a minute, that's a lie. In fact, many of us do share what we know. We do learn from others. We do encourage our staff to work with others. And as many of you know, we host dozens of visits every year at University Settlement or The Door or other settlement houses where we both teach and learn from an amazing number of visitors. At this conference, we even decided it was very important to send 10 staff members from our organization, knowing how valuable this experience will be to our future. Generally speaking, however, not enough sharing goes on. The Eurogroup seems to be addressing this issue very directly, with numerous exchanges at all levels of the organization and across age groups. For example, the youth group, actually now functioning at this conference. But much of this is relatively small scale and limited to the countries which have the financial resources to participate. And I don't believe we have actually measured the impact of these exchanges or sharing. More importantly, in America, little of this occurs. I can't think of a single visit to New York or from a settlement in another state, nor have we sent folks elsewhere in America if we discount the occasional conferences. Sometimes going from one part of New York City to another is a major endeavor. Exchanges or sharing across North and South America are minimal to non-existent, and within each part of the hemisphere, also minimal. I may be exaggerating a bit to make my point, but I don't think so. Technology enables us to do a lot of sharing, or pretend to be sharing, through the internet. We have access to more information than we could ever assimilate. Far more research is available than we can organize for effective use. Far more documentation of best practices is just a click away. But let's be honest, Who does this kind of sharing or searching? How much time is really spent by our staff on this exercise? Who actually reads further than the executive summaries of any source material? Who has the time or attention span to be a continuous learner? There is obviously no substitute for personal interactions, irrespective of the ubiquitous nature of media. Sharing is hard, isolation is easy. Just doing your job is what you're paid for, not stepping back and doing some reading or critical thinking. Again, what are we to do? Here the answer is obvious and well within our control. Be open to more sharing. Dedicate even your scarce resources to this function. Be less defensive in what you think you know. Be less introspective and more open to personal risk-taking. Make sure that you and your organization, from top to bottom, has the time and space to see the larger context in which you work. Reward staff for growing in their interest and expertise and not just doing their job well. This conference is the perfect example of what we must do, reinforcing our global community and sharing common interests and actions. Advocacy versus program delivery. The Settlement House movement, from its origins in London to its spread across Europe and the Americas and other parts of the globe, was rooted not just in the provision of much-needed programs to disadvantaged individuals and families, but equally important to advocacy for important social and economic issues. The settlements were at the heart of the progressive era in the late 19th and early 20th century, when the relationship between government and its community obligations was being reshaped. I would argue here, as strongly as I am able, that we must return to those roots. We must refocus our energies towards advocacy and education around fundamentally important issues, and not be satisfied that we are just conducting quality programs. What are some of these issues? As you've heard, economic justice, access for all to work and mobility, appreciation for the strengths of new populations, stability in our communities, and so on. Why is this so easy to say and difficult to implement? There is little or no money to pay for this function in any of our organizations. We are too dependent on government funding and control, in some cases representing some or most of our income, when it is the government which would often be the focus of our advocacy. We may not be willing to take risks and get out of our general comfort level. We may lack the expertise needed in organizing and teaching. We may be creating enemies when now we have a few, and be uncomfortable when others are angry with us for what we say or do. We may even possibly be on the losing side of many fights and arguments. We are, way too often, passive or silent in our response to what is happening in the world. We have many small victories, fewer big victories. This wonderfully planned conference will display quite clearly the essential and wonderful humanitarian work we do. But what will also become clear is that not a single country in the world is leaning politically in the right direction, either on the issue of immigration or other concerns of major importance to us. As you just heard, here in Germany, Chancellor Merkel is criticized for her remarkably courageous efforts on the immigration issue, and then loses politically in her home state, and then most recently in a Berlin election. Governments are drifting to the right, or creating impossible tests for becoming a citizen, or cutting off immigration, or isolating newcomers in communities not capable of providing sufficient services, or cutting back on key parts of the social welfare state, or voting to restore economic boundaries between countries. In America, a country born on the premise of immigration, we have a presidential candidate who may well win, who has made his platform based on exclusion and prejudice and fear and every phobia one can manage, what we call nativism. Even the UN is appearing weak in trying to resolve any number of international conflicts. We can blame leaders for this, or we can wonder why people vote for these representatives. We may be losing the battle of social influence even if we do excellent work. We don't have the necessary media appeal or capacity. We have not won the minds and hearts of all the people. We provide the legitimation of doing good, but too often only on the margins. We don't have the power. Governments and others can say we are doing great things and then turn around and enact policies opposed to our core values and principles. So what am I suggesting? That we immediately become more constructively aggressive about the causes we believe in. As said before, just as Jane Addams did 125 years ago and over her entire career. Running Hull House, her settlement, was the least of her accomplishments. She was a world advocate for peace and justice and equality. Where is she today? Where are the new Jane Addams? My recommendations are as follows. Deliberately and forcefully declare that the purpose of settlements and neighborhood centers is to advocate for causes which benefit our communities and our constituents as much as it is to conduct quality programs. We must challenge our neighbors, our elected officials, to pursue a social justice agenda. We need to educate people that there is little to or nothing to fear by addressing the key challenges of our time. Remember that our movement has a purpose and mission just as important today as in 1884 when Toynbee Hall was founded in the East End of London. Some of you may think that I'm being overly pessimistic in this talk, or perhaps unfair regarding the excellent work we all do, or that I'm offering only criticisms and not solutions. That is not my intent. Quite the opposite. You should not be pessimistic or worried or sad or feel helpless or hopeless. Instead, feel constructively angry. Feel empowered. Feel energized by your friends and what you will hear and learn at this conference. The solutions are in this room, not just for this couple of days, but when you go home. Berlin is the perfect place for us to claim our rightful and expected place in the fight for justice and equality across the globe. Being actively engaged with IFS is the perfect forum to have your voices heard. For the past 2 weeks, the United Nations has been holding its annual meeting in New York, with almost 200 countries being represented. For the first time, the UN has adopted a declaration on migrants and refugees, responding to the sad fact that there are now over 65 million refugees around the globe, an increase of 5 million just in the past year. This document, approved by the very diverse membership, not generally inclined to agree on anything, will be known as the New York Declaration. Before we close this conference in a few days, we should agree that we need to produce and support an IFS declaration which will reflect the work of our international movement. Thank you, everyone. This is an important time for us to be together.